Hi, I am Sharon Knight, President and CEO of Hope Communities, and I'm so happy that you are joining us here today for our Building Community Check-in. We have been providing housing, educational programs, and support services to some of the most vulnerable in Denver for the last 40 years. And a big part of what we've done is tried to build community, building relationships across neighborhoods, and trying to do more together than any of us could ever do independently. We've started these Facebook Live shows to be able to reach out and to continue building community, even as people are in quarantine. And so it's really nice to make connection with you today. We like to provide a little bit of news, some resources that are available to you, and also some activities and things that might help you get through this stay at home and safe at home period. So first for news, the governor has allowed restaurants to start serving in the restaurant, in the building again, encouraging more outside seating, but also allowing restaurants to have up to 50% capacity or up to 50 people, whichever is a lesser number. So that's great news for people who want to get out. We have some day camps that will be opening this summer. There aren't going to be any overnight or residential camps, but there will be some day camps for our kids. They will have to maintain social distance and have face coverings, but they'll be there up to 25 kids in an outside setting and up to 10 in an inside setting. There has been new testing that's going on at the Pepsi Center. As we mentioned the last time we talked, someone needs to demonstrate at least one of the symptoms of COVID in order to get that testing. But I've talked with someone who went through that process and it was very easy, not a long line and pretty seamless. So that went really well for them. Also, there's a new scam that's going on that I want to make you aware of. It has to do with people who are calling us to say that there might be fraud on our credit card. They are calling as if they were our credit card company, and they're asking for information. They might start out exactly the way that your credit card company would, to say, well, we noticed that there was this expenditure for $27.55 at Target on Tuesday. Or they might say, they'll go through a couple of those which sound pretty normal, like your credit card company really might ask you about, but then they will continue to ask you for more information, and they will suggest that you set up mobile banking. One of the things that's been happening a lot with this particular scam is that someone will ask you a question and then they'll put you on hold for a minute, saying that they have to talk to their supervisor or they'll be right back, and then they'll come back and ask you another question. In reality, what some of the credit card companies are saying is that those individuals are trying to set up a scam account on their mobile device. And every time the company, the credit card company, asks for more information, they get back on the line and ask you for information. So it could be pretty tough on us if we were to fall into that situation and fall prey to this scam. So a suggestion is, if you get a call from your credit card company saying that there is fraud, you can listen to that. But if they want to take you to a next step and ask you information, it would be really good to just say, I'm sorry, I've got to get off the phone for a minute. Can you call me back in a few minutes? And then to actually call your credit card company with the number that you know is a real number and let them know that you just got this call, and double check to make sure that it really was them that made the call and not someone else. So there's always new scams, it seems like. This is just one more to be aware of. I have a couple of quotes for you today. The one is, life is a journey to be experienced, not a problem to be solved. That actually was said by Winnie the Pooh in an A.A. Milne book. Another quote is, today I will start a journey of self-discovery and open myself up to new pathways to success, even if I never thought about those possibilities before. I will do my best to help my personal values and my life goals to be in alignment. That's a quote actually from me that I wrote down at one point in my life when I was trying to discover new things. So we know that a lot of our viewers have lost work as a result of the pandemic, and they're at a point where they're starting to think about their futures, trying to figure out what they want to do. Do they want to go back to their old jobs? Do they want to look for something else? Maybe their old job is not even possible anymore as the economy shifts. And so while many of us think about our work as a means of survival, and certainly paying rent and utilities and putting food on the table is of paramount importance, it's also possibly a time when we can reflect and take a step back and think about what we would do if we really could follow our life's dream in terms of career. So my guest that I have with me today is going to help me with this topic. Lisa Van Raemdonck is from the CU Denver School of Public Affairs. She runs the professional development and community programs such as the Denver Community Leadership Forum that I participated in. That is a really great leadership program that includes an outward bound adventure. She also teaches some other classes for CU. She has done a presentation for us on the importance of identifying our values and trying to align those with our next steps in life. And so I am going to share my screen with you so that you can hear her presentation.
Hey everybody, like Sharon mentioned, I'm Lisa, and I'm just happy to be here with you to share some thoughts, some things that I've been thinking about related to personal core values. So as Sharon mentioned, I work with people who work in nonprofits and government and run leadership and professional development programs for those kinds of folks. And one of the things we talk a lot about in those programs is the importance of understanding your own personal core values in work, but also just in life. And this has come up again now even more so with COVID-19 and more recently as I've been watching the news and watching some of our leaders in our communities either really exhibit some core values or maybe not, or where I've seen them exhibit core values that aren't the same as mine. And then it came up again recently. My husband was laid off from his job and was preparing for some interviews to try to get another job. And we were talking about some of his core values and how he might describe those in a job interview situation. And so when Sharon invited me to come talk about core values, it was a nice match. So I want to just start by giving you some examples of why I think it's important to be able to talk about your core values and to be able to say them kind of clearly. It's one thing to be able to think about what they are in your head or sort of have a sense of them, but it's something else to be able to talk about them really clearly with someone else. So one of the reasons why I think it's important is an interview situation, like I was talking about with my husband, kind of a typical interview question to try to get at like who you are as a person. And so for you to be able to say, these are some of my values, that can really help you really quickly describe who you are as a person to someone who's interviewing you. And for my husband too, we were talking about when you don't have the exact experience that the job is looking for, you're kind of applying for a job that is a little above where you've been before, that you can describe how you would deal with something that you've never dealt with before by describing your core values. So if you were interviewing for a customer service manager position and you got a question about how have you dealt with an angry customer in the past, and maybe you haven't quite had that experience at a management level, you could say, I have core values around fairness and listening. And so the way that I would approach this angry customer would be to listen really clearly and to make sure that I'm treating this person fairly. And you might tell a little more about that, but that's one of the ways that I think it's helpful to be really clear about your core values. Another way I think is to help other people understand why you're making the decisions that you're making. And so to be able to say, I'm not going to attend this event with you, or I'm not going to spend some time with you because I'm spending time with my family during that time. And I just have a really core value around family, and I carve out time to make sure that I'm spending time with them every week. And so when you're saying no to someone, or when you're explaining something that a decision that they might be upset with or confused about, to be able to tie it back to one of your core values helps them understand you better as a person and understand why you're making the decisions that you're making. And then lastly, I think core values and being really clear about them can be really helpful when you're not being your best self, when you're mad and you're frustrated and you're angry about a situation, or you're embarrassed or scared. And when that adrenaline gets pumping and your emotions are really taking over, if you can calm yourself for a bit and think back to like, what are my core values, that can help you react in a way that you'll be more proud of later, right? I think we all have examples of times where, we've had that really emotional reaction and we've just lashed out at someone, and then we've had to go back later and say, I'm really sorry, I wasn't who I wanted to be in that moment. But having that anchor of a core value in some situations can help you get a little bit outside of that immediate, really upset emotion and make a decision that you'll be more proud of later, or have a reaction that you'll be more proud of later. So an example of that for me is when I had angered a friend and they had told me that they were angry with me, and I got embarrassed and sad and disappointed in myself. And, I wanted to just like deflect and sort of blame them and say, well, you asked for too much and I couldn't give it anyway. But it took that moment and I was like, actually, this friendship is really valuable to me. I'm going to stop for a minute and try to calm myself from feeling defensive and embarrassed, and be able to just say, I'm sorry, my friendship is important to us. Like, how can I fix this? And so those are the three ways that I think core values are useful in our lives. Like I mentioned, I think that we oftentimes think of the values in our heads and we act upon them, but we don't necessarily say them. We don't practice saying them to other people. And so when it's in that moment where we need to use them, it would be better to be short, keep it short and sweet. It can be hard. So I think practicing understanding your own values, like naming them and then talking about them, can be really useful. Just sort of a useful exercise when you're thinking about your own life and who you want to be, the best person that you want to be. So I have a whole exercise that I do with folks. We're going to put in the chat 2 links that might help you think about core values. One is just a list of like example core values. So what are we really talking about here? So here's some examples. Honesty is a core value. So maybe you really value telling the truth, not engaging in deception or lying, and being really forthcoming and like honest about, kind of telling it how it is. Maybe that's a value of yours. Maybe playfulness is a value of yours. Maybe you want to keep things light and playful, and that's what you try to bring to your relationships and to your family and community. Sometimes spirituality is a core value, and just really being tied to your religion or your spirituality, like that can be a core value and something that helps you make decisions. Sometimes things like stability is a core value, so that you try to create for yourself and others, really stable kind of situations that are predictable and you can tell what's going to happen next, that sort of thing. Maybe flexibility is your a core value of yours. It's one of mine, just being able to adapt. Like someone throws something at me and like, what is it? How can I adapt? I'm really good in emergency situations. That kind of flexibility is a core value of mine. If you're the person that everyone calls, like when they're in trouble, like, I'm not sure what to do, how do I manage this? That can be, a value. So it's less about having the right, like someone else telling you what the right words are and more about you being really clear about how you talk about your values. The other thing to think about is that, values are really personal. Your culture, your religion, your family, all of those things tell you how to act and how to be and give you expectations, but there's something a little different about what do you want for you. And when I think about values, I think, of course, it takes all of those other parts into consideration, like what I've learned from my family and culture and all those other things. But at the end of the day, it's really about like who I want to be, are my values. We might try to give our values to our kids. And we know at the end of the day, they might learn from them, they might take some, but they're going to create their own values. So that's how you can tell sort of what's a value. The other thing about values is that we try to keep away from judging them. So like, you value something, you have a value. Sometimes that can be used well or for good and sometimes not. But in and of itself, it's not like good or evil. So we try to stay away from judging those things. So if you value money, if you value having financial stability, that's not necessarily good or bad, right? So we try to keep the value judgments out of the values, I guess. So let's think about some values that you might have. Take a look at the link and see if any of these words come to mind for you. One of the ways to understand what is a value for you is to think about how one of your friends would describe you. So someone would say, Lisa's always really friendly. So being friendly is a value probably for her. So thinking about how someone else might describe you can help you say what your values are, because sometimes it's hard to look inside. It's easier to look from the outside and see what someone would say. So you might ask a friend, like, what would you say about me? What do you think based on how I act, what do you think my values are? So once you've gotten through this list and you've come up with a couple of them, it's useful to kind of play with them a little bit, to be able to think about how they show up in your life so that you can describe them better to others. So a couple of ways to think about them is to think, how do you show them? So I have a value around family. And so one of the ways that I show that value is that every time I get a text message from my niece, who lives very far away, she's always lived very far away, I'm the faraway aunt. Whenever I get a text message from her, I respond. She is always the priority. If she emails that she wants to play video games or she wants to get on FaceTime or whatever, I stop what I'm doing. And my husband knows that too, that she's the priority. And so, even if we're like we're eating dinner or something, she's in a different time zone and she texts, hey, do you want to play a game? Then I'll hurry up and finish dinner to go play a game with her. And that's just a value of mine. So that's how it shows up. So that helps me tell a story about how it shows up. Another way to kind of play with your value and think about like, what does it mean in your life, your values, is to think about, when do your values stop you from doing something? It's an interesting question. So you might think about privacy. You have a value around privacy that might stop you from getting online in certain ways. It might stop you from downloading an app on your phone that doesn't seem like it keeps privacy very well. Might stop you from sharing stories a little bit with people, with friends or acquaintances. So you think about like, how does that show up? One of the things that can definitely happen is that your values can sometimes be in conflict with each other. And you might already be thinking of ways that values show up, but then ways that they're in conflict. So let me take this example of my family. And anytime my niece wants to play a game, whatever she wants to do, I'm in. She's turning 13. So it's that, you know, it's a special time for her in her life. And I also have a value of privacy. And the other day she texted and said, I found a new game that I want to play online with you. You have to get an account and you have to download this app. And so, like, awesome. Yes, let's play a game. We'll play it at this time. Great. I value family and I'm going to drop everything to play games with her and interact with her. And then I looked at the app. I also value privacy. And I realized that the app was wanting it was asking for a bunch of information. And so I was feeling uncomfortable. And those two values were like in conflict, right? Like I value my own privacy, but I also really, want to engage with my niece. And I knew that her mom had seen the app and that they were using it at school. So that felt a little better with the privacy, but it still wasn't feeling great. And so these were in conflict. And for me, what I ended up doing is I downloaded the app, I played a game with her, and then I deleted the app off my phone. So knowing when your values are in conflict with each other and then like, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to prioritize one value or another value? So that's something that shows up that it can be helpful for you to have those core values as anchors in order to describe what you're thinking. A couple of other ways to think about values is, what values really help you shine, help you soar, help you be your best self. Maybe it's that value around friendship or that value around honesty. So thinking about that, like when do your values help you be your best self? When do your values stop you from doing something? And then lastly, I would say, talk about your values with others. So find a friend that wants to talk about this with you and practice sharing. Certainly if you're doing an interview, that's really helpful. If you're going to use it in that context of doing an interview, then definitely practice talking about your values. But the more that you get out of your head and actually say things about your values, just the more practiced that you'll be and the more natural that it'll sound when you're trying to use this as a way to engage and talk and build friendships and relationships. So I hope that this was just a little tidbit, something that might help you either as you're thinking about your next thing, as you're potentially, interviewing for jobs, as you're dealing with really tough stuff in your life, as you're dealing with being locked in your house with lots of people for many hours at a time, and you're wanting to be your best self for them, but it's hard. And in helping other people understand who you are better so that so that you can be a better friend and they can be a better friend to you too. I hope you're staying safe, and I hope you're taking care of each other. So it's been lovely to spend a little bit of time with you, and take care.
So we've got to just we're stopping to share the screen, and I'll be back here with you. I think that what Lisa has talked about is so important as you're making the next steps in your life. And if you have a little bit of time now to sit back and reflect on what has been important to you, who are you really? What do you really care about? Do you have a current job that is in conflict with your values? Is there a way that you can find something that might be better aligned? And certainly this is true for values, but also in terms of your job, but also in terms of your life. I mean, sometimes we have associations with people that don't share the same values. And so it might be a good time to figure out if those are the right people that you want to be around. So just good time for soul searching. And certainly I think in terms of the career path, that authenticity is really important when you're doing an interview. So knowing who you are, being able to talk about your values, talk about your skills, talk about your experience from truth is very powerful when you are in a job interview. So consider that moving forward. So many thanks to Lisa for joining our show today. I hope that you enjoyed hearing from her. We will have some links for you for extra materials that go along with this topic. The book that we are going to review today, as we always do with every show, is called Necessary Lies by Diane Chamberlain. It really does tie somewhat into the conversation around core values. I'm doing this review myself. It'll be posted right after this Facebook show. The book takes place in rural North Carolina in the 60s. And the story tells us about a young social worker who was in her first position working in a rural area with tobacco farmers who have had many years of intergenerational poverty. She happens to be married to a businessman and associates with a country club set who absolutely cannot understand why she wants to do this work and why she wants to be with, as they call it, white trash all day when they could spend time with her and she could relax with them at the country club instead. This is a time in North Carolina, as in many states at that time, where there were some social policies and norms that were not very helpful to people in poverty. And so this book goes into that some, and our social worker must face her own dilemmas, her own clash of values between the different lives that she experiences during this time. And it's just a fascinating book. It really resonated with me personally, and I think that you really might like it. So please watch that review after this show. I'd love to have you tell me if you read the book and if you enjoyed it as well. So it's been really nice to spend time with you again. Please, at any time, if you have any questions of us, you can send us an email at info@hopecommunities.org, and we will get back with you. Have a really great day and a great rest of the week. On Friday, we'll have one of our resource navigators here talking with us about resources that are available to people at this time, and we will have that in English and in Spanish. Take care.